They told me the vault door had eaten 3 teams of Royal Engineers before they called me, and I believed it the second I saw the thing, 12 feet of fused alloy. No seam, no handle, humming faint and wrong under a coat of 15 years of dust. I'm not an engineer. I'm not even close. My name's Myra Thessaly, and what I am is a maintenance tech on the underdeck of Coleth shipyard, which means I spend most days on my knees in a crawlspace listening to pipes complain. They don't call people like me down to the Royal Archive levels. Nobody calls people like me down to the Royal Archive levels. So when the request came through, fix the vault, priority override, half the engineering corps standing around it with their scanners dead in their hands, I figured somebody upstairs had run out of better options and was scraping the bottom of the roster. I was right. I just didn't know how far down the roster went or what was waiting on the other side of that door. By the time I got the call, the vault had already chewed through a full day of the Empire's best. First, it was the structural team, who tried cutting a sample core from the door's edge and broken 2 drill heads doing it. Then it was the thermal crew, who tried to read the seal's internal temperature gradient and gotten back numbers that made no physical sense, which they wrote off as equipment failure rather than admit the door was doing something they didn't have a category for. After that came the acoustic specialists, who fired resonance pulses into the alloy for 6 straight hours trying to map a mechanism that wasn't where mechanisms are supposed to be, and gave up with nothing to show for it but a headache and a report full of careful hedging. By the time Director Pell Orish's team arrived, the 6th team, the one with rank enough that nobody above them could send anyone else, the vault had already become a small embarrassment nobody wanted their name attached to. The Velnari don't do things small. Their archive halls are carved from a single mineral vein, polished to a shine that throws your own face back at you twice, once in the floor, once in the ceiling, and every surface is etched with script nobody living can fully read anymore. 6 engineers stood in front of the vault when I got there, formal coats buttoned to the throat, scanners hanging useless at their sides. Director Pell Orish was packing a groove into the stone, and when she saw me, coveralls, tool bag, hands already grimed from the lift shaft I'd been in 20 minutes earlier, her mouth did a thing that wasn't quite a sneer, but wanted to be one. "You're the maintenance call," she said. "I'm the maintenance call," I agreed. "This door has resisted full diagnostic scan, thermal mapping, and acoustic resonance testing. We believe the locking mechanism may be fused beyond function." She said it like a verdict, like she was reading me my last rites before letting me try and fail in front of everyone. I set my bag down and looked at the door instead of her. That's the thing about machines. They don't care how many letters you've got after your name. They care whether you're actually looking at them. "Mind if I touch it?" "It's been scanned at every." I didn't ask if it had been scanned. I asked if I could touch it. She waved a hand, somewhere between permission and dismissal, and I stepped past 6 engineers who'd spent 3 days failing and put my palm flat against 12 feet of cold alloy. It wasn't dead. That was the first thing. Whatever scanners they'd been running must have been calibrated for the wrong kind of signal, because under my hand I could feel it, a slow pulse, almost a heartbeat, buried so deep in the metal that it'd take a body pressed right up against the door to catch it at all. Machines that old don't usually still have a pulse. Something was keeping this one alive. "There's no seam," Orish said behind me, already bored, already composing the report where she wrote me off. "No mechanism we can locate. If there were a hinge, a latch, anything conventional." "It's not the door that's locked." I crouched down, ran my fingers along the base where stone met metal. "It's what's behind it. The door's just doing what it's told." "That's not how locks work." "That's exactly how locks work if somebody built them right." I'd spent 11 years learning that machines lie about themselves constantly, show you a clean panel while the real fault's 3 systems back, hum smooth right up until they don't. You learn to stop trusting the face a thing shows you and start listening for what it's actually doing. Down at the base, where the alloy met the stone floor, there was a hairline gap. Not a flaw, a seal. Pressure-fitted, designed to be invisible to anything that scanned from a distance, and meant to be opened by someone close enough, patient enough, and dumb enough to get down on the floor and feel for it by hand. I pulled my pry bar out of the bag. Old thing, scarred along one edge, handle wrapped in tape because the grip wore through years back. Orish actually laughed. "You're going to open a 15-year vault seal with a hand tool." "I'm going to open a 15-year vault seal with patience and a hand tool," I said. "The tool's just there to keep my fingers from breaking." I worked the edge into the gap and pushed, not hard, not fast, just steady, feeling for the moment the resistance changed instead of forcing through it. 11 years of stuck valves and frozen bolts and panels that didn't want to give had taught me that most locks aren't fighting you. They're just old and scared and waiting for somebody to ask nice instead of demand. The seal gave on the fourth try. Not a crack, a long, slow exhale, like the door had been holding its breath for 15 years and finally let it out. The whole 12-foot face shifted half an inch and stopped, and Orish's bored expression dropped clean off her face. "That's not finished," I said. "There's a second catch behind the first. Give me a minute." Nobody said anything else while I worked. I could feel them watching, 6 engineers and a director who'd called me down out of contempt and was now standing very still, and the only sound in that polished hall was my own breathing and the small metal sounds of the bar finding purchase. The second catch took longer, 8 minutes, maybe 10, my knees aching against the stone, but it gave the same way the first one had. Not broken, released. The vault door rolled open on its own weight, slow and silent, and the smell that came out wasn't dust. It was recycled air, faintly stale but breathable, the smell of a sealed room that had been keeping something alive. We found her sitting against the far wall, knees drawn up, in a chamber lined with frozen archive stasis pods that had clearly failed decades ago, except for the one she'd been curled beside, which still hummed with the faintest trace of working power. A girl, maybe 19 by the look of her, pale violet skin gone sallow from years without real light, dark hair grown out long and matted, and eyes that came up to meet mine with an expression I recognized instantly because I've worn it myself. The look of someone who has stopped expecting to be found. Orish's scanner, when she finally raised it with shaking hands, gave a name that made every engineer in that hall go rigid. Lys Avanth, the royal heir, declared lost in the shipyard collapse 15 years back, mourned in a state funeral I vaguely remembered watching on a public feed when I was younger and a lot less tired. They'd built a memorial garden for her 2 decks up. They'd named a star lane after her. She'd been 3 rooms away the whole time, sealed in by a vault built to protect her from whatever had caused the collapse, kept alive by a single archive pod that nobody had thought to check, because the room had been declared structurally inert and not worth the resources to rescan. "She's been alone," I said, and it wasn't a question. "The collapse," Lys said. Her voice came out rough, unused. "There were people coming for me. My nurse sealed the door from the outside, said it would hold until someone came who knew how to open it properly." Her eyes moved past Orish, past the engineers, and landed back on me, on my hands, on the pry bar still loose in my grip. "Nobody ever came who knew how, not until you didn't." "I didn't know how either," I admitted. "I just listened to what the door wanted instead of what I expected it to want." She almost smiled at that. It looked unfamiliar on her face, like a muscle remembering an old motion. The next 4 hours were a blur of people who outranked me by every measure that mattered to the empire. Physicians, ministers, a representative of the royal house itself, arriving by priority shuttle with an entourage that filled the corridor. And not one of them touched Lys's hand the way I had when I helped her stand, slow and careful, legs unsteady from disuse. Not one of them sat with her on the floor of that chamber while she got her breathing right, because sitting on the floor wasn't dignified, and I'd long since stopped caring what was dignified versus what was useful. I watched the physicians run their scans without once asking Lice how she felt about being scanned. I watched a minister's aide try to brief her on the appropriate public statement before she'd had a full glass of water. I watched Orish, to her credit, finally crouch down at Lice's level instead of standing over her, 15 years too late to matter much. But I noted it anyway, because people who can learn that fast aren't all bad. Through all of it, Lice kept finding me with her eyes across the room. The way you check a door is still where you left it. And every time I caught the look, I just nodded once, small, like I had nowhere else I needed to be. I did have somewhere else I needed to be. I just figured a shift could wait an hour longer than it should have. The minister, a tall man named Corvath Sen, robes immaculate even down here in the dust, found me afterward in the corridor while I was packing my bag to head back to my shift. "The Crown wishes to recognize you," he said, like it was a sentence being passed. "A title, quarters in the upper ring, a formal place in the court engineering office, with full honors backdated to reflect the significance of." "I appreciate it," I said, and meant it mostly. "But I've got a shift starting in 40 minutes, and my crew's too short already this rotation." He blinked at me like I'd spoken in a language he didn't have a translator for. "You would decline a royal commendation to return to maintenance work." "I'd decline a job I don't want to do my whole life so I can keep doing the one I'm actually good at," I said. "No offense to the upper ring. I hear the lighting's nice." He didn't have anything to say to that. I don't think anyone had ever turned the crown down to his face before, and the look on him was almost worth the whole strange day on its own. Lice caught me at the lift before I left. She'd been cleaned up, some new clothes, hair brushed back, the start of color returning to her face, but she still moved like someone unused to open space, like the corridor was too wide and the ceiling too far away after 15 years pressed into one small room. "You're really going back," she said. "Got a shift." "They offered you everything." "They offered me a desk and a title," I said. "I've got a crowbar and a crew that'll cover for me exactly once before they start complaining. I know which one I actually want." She was quiet a second, looking at me the way she had in the vault, like she was trying to memorize something she was scared would disappear if she looked away. "Will I see you again?" "Probably," I said. "This station's not that big, even with all the upper ring lighting. And for what it's worth, you did the hard part. 15 years of staying alive in a sealed room is a lot more impressive than me getting a door open with a bar and some patience. You didn't have to come down here. They called the wrong person on purpose, didn't they? They were already out of better ideas." "Yeah," I said. "Good thing nobody told the door that." She laughed short, rusty, like the first sound out of a machine that hadn't run in years, and it was a better reward than any title they could have hung on me. I rode the lift back down to the underdeck, tool bag over my shoulder, and got back to the crawlspace with 11 minutes to spare before my shift started, and the pipes down there were still complaining exactly the way I'd left them. And that, more than any throne room could have, felt like coming home.